It is 5:15 in the morning, just outside the perimeter fence of the Boise Airport in Idaho. John DeMuda, a wildlife control specialist, stands in the biting pre-dawn chill, his breath rising in thick plumes through the headlights of his truck. The runway is silent, save for the distant whine of an airliner spooling its engines for an early departure. DeMuda lifts his binoculars toward a row of drainage culverts and metal canopies. A dark mass rises from the ground like smoke. It is not smoke. It is a dense, undulating cloud of thousands of birds, turning and folding in the gray light with a precision that seems to defy physics. They swirl over the runway, a living curtain of feathers heavy enough to bring down a multi-million-dollar aircraft in seconds. DeMuda reaches for his equipment, knowing that whatever he does next buys him only a few hours. He will be standing in this exact spot tomorrow. And the bird he is fighting does not even belong on this continent. It was let loose, on purpose, by a man who loved Shakespeare. That is the contradiction at the center of this story. Today, the United States is locked in a quiet, exhausting war against an $800 million crop destroyer, an invader so aggressive it reshapes the economics of farms, feedlots, and airfields from coast to coast. The crisis was not born from an industrial accident or an experiment gone wrong. It was born from a literary obsession. A single 19th century idealist, armed with a love of Shakespeare, released a handful of these birds into a New York park and accidentally unleashed an empire. For more than a century, the human answer has been brute force, enormous budgets, and near total failure. Millions of dollars flow each year into high-tech deterrents, chemical agents, and traps, and still the species thrives in the tens of millions. And the thing that is finally working is stranger than any weapon we built. It does not come from human engineering. It comes from an ancient predator-prey arrangement that operates entirely without our permission. To understand how one bird conquered a continent, you have to go back to 1890. Central Park, New York City, a cold March morning. A man named Eugene Schieffelin, a wealthy pharmaceutical manufacturer and a member of the American Acclimatization Society, walks into the park carrying several large wicker cages. Schieffelin has a singular, eccentric ambition. He believes that every bird mentioned in the plays of William Shakespeare should be living in America. In his mind, it is a gift, a cultural bridge between the old world and the new. He opens the cages and releases roughly 100 European starlings, Sturnus vulgaris, into the Manhattan sky, spread across 2 winters in 1890 and 1891. Most of them die. Only about 16 pairs survive that first brutal American winter, sheltering under the eaves of the American Museum of Natural History. 32 birds. That is the entire founding population. Every starling on this continent today traces back to them. The starlings had landed in an ecosystem with no defense against them. No native predator specialized in hunting them. Endless human-altered land to exploit. Their spread was explosive. By 1928, they had crossed the Mississippi. By the early 1940s, the leading edge had reached the West Coast, pouring into the orchards of California and the valleys of Oregon and Washington. Within a few more decades, they had pushed all the way to Alaska. In a little over a century, the descendants of those 16 pairs swelled into an estimated peak near 200 million birds before settling closer to 140 million today. They became one of the most widely distributed birds on the continent, from the subtropical tip of Florida to the cold edge of the Pacific Northwest. One man, 100 birds. A century later, a population you measure in the hundreds of millions. As the numbers grew, so did the damage, and American industry found itself fighting a war on several fronts at once. The first front was agriculture. A landmark study led by Cornell researcher David Pimentel estimated that European starlings cause roughly $800 million in crop damage in the United States every year. They descend on cherry orchards, vineyards, and berry farms in flocks so dense they can strip a harvest in days. In the dairy country of the Midwest and the Great Lakes, the nightmare takes a different shape. Starlings drop into livestock feed troughs and pick out the high-protein grain meant for cattle, which lowers milk yields and slows the animal's growth. Their droppings foul what is left, spreading disease and corroding the metal of barns and equipment. They do not just eat the profit, they contaminate what they leave behind. Then the war moved from the farm to the sky, and the stakes changed from money to human lives. The Federal Aviation Administration tracks wildlife hazards in obsessive detail, and starlings sit among the very highest risk classes in civil aviation. On October 4, 1960, Eastern Airlines Flight 375 lifted off from Boston's Logan International Airport. At about 120 feet, the Lockheed L-188 Electra flew straight into a massive flock of starlings. The birds were drawn into 3 of the plane's 4 turboprop engines. Power collapsed. The aircraft rolled, pitched up, and fell almost vertically into Boston Harbor. 62 of the 72 people aboard were killed. It remains the deadliest bird strike in American history, and it changed how aviation thinks about wildlife forever. Across the decades since, from 1990 through 2023, reported wildlife strikes have cost United States civil aviation roughly $1.48 billion, and starlings remain one of the deadliest culprits in the sky. Faced with all of this, humans reached for force and spared no expense. No poison solved it. No pyrotechnics ended it. No netting stopped it. Agricultural agencies and city governments deployed propane cannons that bark like shotguns, automated lasers that sweep the roosts at dusk, and recorded distress calls blasted through high-decibel speakers. Dairies bolted miles of stainless spikes, angled ledges, and heavy netting over every gap wider than an inch. Trappers ran live decoy birds. Shooters ran culls, and the starlings barely blinked. Decades of harassment and killing, and the regional populations held. The campaign that was supposed to end in eradication hardened instead into something else. A permanent, expensive tax on American infrastructure, paid out year after year with no end in sight. If the collision of history, biology, and engineering is the kind of story you come here for, take a second to subscribe before we get to why all that money failed. It matters more than you would think. Because to move past the stalemate, scientists first had to kill a myth. For decades, the popular story held that the European starling had driven native cavity-nesting birds toward collapse. The eastern bluebird, the purple martin, the northern flicker, all supposedly evicted from their nests and pushed to the brink. Starlings do evict native birds, aggressively, so the story felt obviously true. But when the ornithologist Walter Koenig published a long-term analysis in the journal Conservation Biology, the data refused to cooperate. Across decades of continent-wide census records, he found almost no evidence that starlings had caused a sweeping, population-wide crash. Of all the species examined, only sapsuckers showed a clear negative signal. Starlings win individual fights at individual nest boxes, and they can suppress breeding in one spot. But native birds tend to find another cavity or shift their timing. The real story was never an apocalypse. It was relentless, local displacement. And that correction mattered because it pushed scientists away from emotion and toward the actual machinery of the bird. So look at the machinery. The European starling is a small, dense, muscular engine of adaptation. Most birds have jaws built mainly to clamp shut. The starling evolved the opposite, powerful muscles that force its beak open against resistance. It is called open bill probing. The bird drives its closed beak into packed soil, matted grass, or a pile of grain, then muscles the bill apart to pry the ground open and expose whatever is hiding underneath. That one trick unlocks food that native species simply cannot reach, and it lets starlings thrive in exactly the hard, compacted, human-made landscapes where other birds give up. They are built for our world better than the birds that were already here. And that body is wired into a brain and a social system that make it almost impossible to scare. Starlings move in enormous coordinated flocks that behave less like individuals and more like a single networked organism, sharing information about food and danger. That is why the scaring tools fail over time. Fire a propane cannon and yes, the birds spike with stress, their stress hormones climb, the flock scatters. For about a day. Then the habituation begins. Within days, sometimes within hours, the starlings notice that the cannon is on a timer, that the laser never actually hurts anyone, that the distress call is a recording. They run the math, decide the threat is fake, and drop right back onto the food. Every expensive deterrent we built shares the same fatal flaw. It bluffs. And starlings call bluffs for a living. The real answer, when it finally came, was not a better machine. It was the return of a threat that cannot be faked. Land managers stopped trying to trick the birds and started stacking pressures that hit the starling where it is actually vulnerable. The dramatic half of that stack arrives on wings of its own, trained raptors, peregrine falcons, and Harris's hawks, flown by professional falconers. For decades, humans imitated predators, and the starlings learned the imitation. A live falcon cannot be lured away. When a real predator carves through the airspace over a runway or a vineyard, the entire risk calculation changes in an instant. At the Dęblin military airfield in Poland, a rigorous field study found that flying trained raptors was among the most effective methods ever recorded for clearing starlings, more effective against them than against almost any other bird on the field. A living predator does not startle the flock. It dismantles its confidence, and the birds abandon the site rather than die there. But the falcon is only one jaw of a pincer. The other jaw is far less cinematic and just as decisive, sealing the place shut. While the raptors keep the flocks moving, the people on the ground close every cavity, strip out every easy roost, and change how feed is handled. Researchers have shown that even with a predator overhead, starlings will still try to claim a nest box if the opening is simply left available. So the predation has to be paired with relentless maintenance, angled steel where they used to perch, heavy mesh over every gap, feeding schedules tightened so grain is not left sitting in the open. It is not victory. It is a managed truce. Broad eradication failed, and the bird is here permanently, but by combining a threat they cannot habituate to with a structure they cannot enter, humans can finally dictate one thing: where the starlings are allowed to be. And that is where the money story turns strange, because this truce never ends, which means the cost never ends either. In the usual telling, an invasive species is either wiped out or written off. The starling fits neither box. It is too deeply woven into the continent to remove, so the entire effort to manage it has become a permanent line item. Airports keep standing wildlife hazard budgets, full-time biologists, contract falconers on call to keep the runways clear. Dairies and orchards treat deterrents not as a one-time purchase, but as a recurring cost baked straight into the price of food. A whole industry now lives in that gap: the manufacturers, the consultants, the ecological engineers. The goal stopped being total victory a long time ago. The goal now is to hold the losses to a level everyone can live with. And the starling is not the exception. It is the pattern. On Guam, the brown tree snake has permanently rewired the island's ecology and locked authorities into an endless cycle of cargo inspections and containment. In the Great Lakes, zebra mussels clog the intake pipes of power plants and water systems, a biological invasion turned into a forever maintenance bill. In the Everglades, hunters and biologists fight the Burmese python year after year, knowing a clean eradication is no longer on the table. Across the southeast, kudzu has stopped being an imported crop and become part of the landscape itself. Each case tells the same hard truth. Once a species adapts to a new continent, the clock on human management stops counting in years and starts counting in centuries. It is 5:15 in the evening now, back at the Boise airport. The winter sun is gone, leaving a cold violet bruise across the Idaho sky. John Demuda sits in the cab of his truck, the engine idling to keep the heater alive. Through the windshield, he watches a small, scattered group of starlings flit over the fence and settle into a far tree line, well clear of the runways. His equipment sits silent on the passenger seat. The departures are climbing out without incident. The line for today has held. He looks at the distant flock one last time, puts the truck in gear, and knows he will be back at dawn to do it all again. Maybe that is the real lesson buried in 100 years of failure. We keep treating nature like a machine we can fix once and walk away from. It was never a machine. It is a negotiation that never closes, and we are almost never the ones setting the terms. Given what it costs to hold a species like the starling in check, where should the money go? Into permanent biological pressure like falconry, or into rebuilding our farms and airfields so the birds were never welcome in the first place?